The uprated Saturn I Quarterly Film Report number 28 covers progress during the period April, May, June 1966. In preparation for the launch of AS-203, the Chrysler-built booster for the second uprated Saturn I launch vehicle was shipped from Marshall's Michoud facility on April 7th. It arrived at Cape Kennedy 5 days later. It was moved into Hangar AF for pre-erection inspection and checkout. On April 18th, the stage was erected on LC-37B. On April 4th, the Douglas-built second stage was flown from the West Coast to Cape Kennedy, marking the first delivery of a flight-type second stage aboard the Super Guppy. On April 14th, the instrument unit was flown from Marshall to the Cape aboard the Super Guppy. The nose cone was barged from Marshall to KSC aboard the Poseidon last quarter. On April 21st, the second stage, instrument unit, and nose cone were stacked atop the booster. Pre-launch activities for AS-203 then got underway and continued through the quarter. The prime mission of AS-203 will be to place the second stage with about 10 tons of liquid hydrogen into a circular orbit of 100 nautical miles. This will allow Marshall space scientists to study the dynamics of liquid hydrogen under weightlessness and verify that the stage's engine can be restarted in orbit. Objectives of the tests include determining if the continuous venting system and Gox-Ullage thrusters will properly seat the liquid hydrogen in the bottom of the tank, and if the engine can be adequately chilled down to simulate Saturn V S-4B orbital operations. At Marshall's System Development Facility, in unison with launch preparations at Kennedy Space Center, work efforts continued on development and verification of the computer program tapes for automatic checkout of AS-203. AS-203 is scheduled for launch on July 5th. Following completion of vehicle erection at Launch Complex 34 last quarter, SA-202 continued in pre-flight checkout throughout the report period. AS-202 launch is planned for next quarter. Its mission will be to launch the Apollo spacecraft into suborbital flight, ending in the Pacific Ocean near Wake Island. During re-entry, the spacecraft ablative heat shield will be tested under the high heat loads of re-entry. At Marshall's Michoud assembly facility, Chrysler completed post-static checkout May 25th on the booster for the fourth flight vehicle. The stage is scheduled for shipment to the Cape next quarter. Following the second successful static firing, a leak was detected inside the thrust chamber on engine position number 4 of the fifth flight booster. Investigation revealed a horizontal crack in a tube about 10 inches below the injector face. The engine was removed and shipped to Rocketdyne Neosho for repair. The booster was shipped back to Michoud on April 7th, arriving 6 days later. Modification was performed, including replacement of the repaired engine, and post-static checkout began on May 31st. Pre-static checkout of the sixth flight vehicle booster was completed early this quarter. The stage was shipped to Marshall from Michoud May 19th, arriving May 28th. It was installed in the static test stand May 31st. A short-duration firing was conducted June 23rd, followed by a long-duration firing June 29th. This test series marks another milestone in the Saturn IIB program, since the Rocketdyne-built engines have been uprated to 205,000 pounds thrust. No problems were encountered, except for a thrust chamber leak on one engine which necessitated engine removal for repair. A replacement engine was installed to preserve schedule, and the stage is undergoing preparation for shipment to Michoud, planned for next quarter. Assembly of the first stage for the seventh flight vehicle was completed in mid-quarter. Pre-static checkout got underway May 31st, about 2.5 weeks ahead of schedule. Checkout is scheduled for completion early next quarter. Fabrication of the eighth flight booster was completed early this quarter. Stage assembly started April 14th and is scheduled for completion next report period. Fabrication of the ninth flight vehicle was completed in June. Assembly is underway. Also at Michoud, fabrication of the 10th flight vehicle was started in early April and continued throughout the report period. Chrysler has only 2 more boosters remaining to be manufactured under the present contract. All of the long lead time items for these two have been procured. First stage lightweight LOX tank qualification testing continued this quarter by Chrysler at Michoud. Both the 70-inch and the 105-inch tanks were tested to 125% design load, meeting test completion deadline and requirements for SA-203. Additional testing is being conducted to qualify the tanks to 140% design load for manned flight reliability. The 105-inch LOX tank has been tested to 140% of design load under all conditions except two. The 70-inch tank has been qualified under all conditions except maximum thin load. Meanwhile, at Douglas's Sacto facility, the second stage for the fourth flight vehicle underwent modification, rework, and post-static checkout at the vertical checkout laboratory. The stage was accepted by Marshall at Sacto on May 6th. Shipment to Cape Kennedy will be next quarter. The second stage for the fifth flight vehicle was shipped from Huntington Beach to Sacto April 9th. On April 13th, the stage was installed in the Beta 3 test stand where pre-static and subsystem checkout proceeded as scheduled. Following a successful 440 seconds acceptance firing on June 2nd, post-static checkout was completed June 28th. Following installation of the J2 engine in April for the sixth flight vehicle's second stage and factory checkout completion in late May, final inspection was made and the stage was shipped to Sacto June 30th. In April, Douglas completed joining of the thrust structure and forward and aft skirts of the second stage of the seventh flight vehicle and installed the engine in May. Factory checkout was started and continued through the report period. Completion of checkout is scheduled for early next quarter. The second stage of the eighth flight vehicle was removed from the insulation chamber on June 6th. Necessary cleaning and miscellaneous parts installations were completed in June. Factory checkout will take place next quarter. Manufacturing was completed on the common bulkhead for the second stage of the ninth flight vehicle at Santa Monica. Welding of the liquid hydrogen tank segments and LOX tank assemblies was completed, and the LOX tank was shipped to Huntington Beach June 16th. Stage assembly will be completed next quarter. Fabrication of the 10th flight vehicle's second stage was started last quarter and was drawing to a successful close at the end of this report period. Assembly and miscellaneous testing is planned for next quarter. On April 13th at Sacto, during S4B structural testing, the common bulkhead and LOX tank failed. The failure is being thoroughly investigated by Marshall and Douglas personnel. However, subsequent structural testing on the hydrostatic test tank specimen qualified the design. At IBM Huntsville, component installation in the fourth flight instrument unit started last period was completed the first week in May. Checkout began in May and was completed on June 28th. The unit will be shipped from IBM to the Cape early next quarter. The fifth flight IU structural fabrication started last quarter was completed May 4th. Component installation was begun 10 days later with completion planned for next quarter. Also at IBM Huntsville, structural fabrication was started for the sixth flight instrument unit. At Marshall, work effort is underway for in-house manufacture of 4 uprated Saturn I nose cones. These units will be carried atop the vehicles which will place lunar modules into orbit. In late April, 10 astronauts visited the Marshall Center for briefings on the uprated Saturn I program. Among the group were the 3 men who will fly the first manned Saturn Apollo 1B mission. Virgil I. Grissom, command pilot, Edward White, and Roger Chaffee. The astronauts were given briefings including primary hardware description and design philosophy by Saturn engineers and management officials. The astronauts also studied flight data on the performance of the first uprated Saturn I, which launched an unmanned Apollo spacecraft last quarter. A summary of the Saturn IB program through the months April, May, and June shows major accomplishments in all areas. continued buildup of Saturn IB stages and equipment, acceleration of the manufacturing phase of the program, and continuation of qualification testing.